In the dark shadows, in the white cold, fearlessly we search for knowledge new and old. We drink the strong spirits and read the ancient tomes. The order of the Abracast. We are the brave and the bold.
My most difficult experiment. In 1912, Jung had some significant dreams that he did not understand. He gave particular importance to two of these, which he felt showed the limitations of Freud's conceptions of dreams. The first follows. I was in a southern town in a rising street with a narrow half landings, and it was 12 o'clock, midday, bright sunshine. An old Austrian customs guard or someone similar passes by me, lost in thought, and someone says, "That is one who cannot die. He died already 30 or 40 years ago, but has not yet managed to decompose." And I was very surprised. Here a striking figure came, a knight of powerful build, clad in a yellowish armor, and he looks solid and inscrutable, and nothing impresses him. And on his back he carries a red Maltese cross. And he continued to exist from the 12th century, and daily between 12 and 1 o'clock midday he takes the same route. No one marvels at these two apparitions, but I was extremely surprised. I hold back my interpretive skill as a regards to the old Austrian Freud occurred to me as regards the night I myself. Inside a voice calls. It is all empty and disgusting, and I must bear it. Jung found this dream oppressive and bewildering, and Freud was unable to interpret it. Around a year and a half later, Jung had another dream. I dreamt at the time, this was shortly after Christmas of 1912, that I was sitting with my children in a marvelous and richly furnished castle apartment, an open columned hall. We were sitting at a round table whose top was marvelous dark green stone. Suddenly a gull or a dove flew in and sprang lightly onto the table, and I admonished the children to be quiet so that they would not scare away this beautiful white bird. Suddenly this bird turned into a child of 8 years, a small blonde girl, and ran around playing with my children in a marvelous colonnades, and the child suddenly turned into the gull or dove, and she said the following to me: "Only in the first hour of the night can I become human, while the male dove is busy with the 12 dead." With these words, the bird flew away, and I awoke. In the Black Book, too, Jung noted that it was this dream that made him decide to embark on a relationship with a woman he had met 3 years earlier. In 1925, he remarked that this dream was the beginning of a conviction that the unconscious did not consist of inert material only, but that there was something living down there. He added that he thought of the story as the tabula smaragdina, which means the emerald tablet, the 12 apostles, the signs of the zodiac, and on and on. But that he could make nothing out of the dream except that there was a tremendous animation of the unconsciousness. I drew no technique of getting at the bottom of all this activity. All I could do was just wait and keep on living and watch the fantasies. These dreams led him to analyze his childhood memories, but this did not resolve anything. He realized that he needed to recover the emotional tone of childhood. He recalled that as a child, he used to build houses and other structures, so he took this up again. While he was engaged in this self-analytic activity, he continued to develop his theoretical work. At the Munich Psychoanalytical Congress in September of 1913, he spoke on the psychological types. He argued that there were two basic movements in the libido: extroversion, in which the subject's interest was oriented towards the outer world, and introversion, in which the subject's interest was directed inwardly. Following from this, he posited two types of people, characterized by the predominance of one of these tendencies. The psychologies of Freud and Adler were examples of the fact that the psychologies often took what is true of their type as generally valid. Hence, what was required as a psychology that did justice to both of these types. The following month, on a train ride to Schaffenschmuven, Jung experienced a waking vision of Europe being devastated by a catastrophic flood, which he was repeated 2 weeks later on in the same journey. Commenting on this experience in 1925, he remarked, "It could be taken as Switzerland fenced in by the mountains of the submergence of the world, could be the debris of my former relationships." This led to the following diagnosis of his condition. "I thought to myself, if this means anything, it means that I am hopelessly off." After this experience, Jung feared that he would go mad. He recalled the first thought that the image of the vision indicated a revolution. But as he could not imagine this, he concluded that he was menaced with a psychosis after he had similar visions. In the following winter, I was standing at the window one night, and I looked north, and I saw a blood-red glow flicker off the sea from afar. Stretched from east to west across the northern horizon. And at the time, someone asked me what I thought about the world events in the near future, and I said that I had no thoughts, but saw blood, rivers of blood. In the years directly preceding the outbreak of war, apocalyptic imagery was widespread in European art and literature. For example, in 1912, Wassily Kandinsky wrote of a coming universal catastrophe from 1912 to 1914. Ludwig Meiter painted a series of works known as the apocalyptic landscapes, with scenes of destroyed cities, corpses, and turmoil. Prophecy was in the air. 1899, the famous American medium Lenora Piper predicted that in the coming century there would be a terrible war in different parts of the world that would cleanse the world and reveal the truths of spiritualism. In 1918, Arthur Conan Doyle, let's show a little bit of respect. In 1918, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, the spiritualist and author of the Sherlock Holmes stories, viewed this as having been prophetic. In Jung's account of the fantasy on the train in Liber Novus, the inner voice said that what the fantasy depicted would become completely real, intentionally. He interpreted this subjectively and prospectively, that is, as depicting the imminent destruction of his world. His reaction to the experience was to undertake a psychological investigation of himself. In this epoch, self-experimentation was used in medicine of psychology, introspection that had been one of the main tools of psychological research. Jung came to realize that the transformation in symbols of the libido, it was a book he wrote before this one, could be taken as myself, and that an analysis of it leads inevitably to the analysis of my own unconscious process. He had projected his material onto that of Miss Frank Miller, who he had never met. Up to this point, Jung had been an active thinker. and had been aware or averse to fantasy as a form of thinking. I held it to be altogether impure, a sort of incestuous intercourse, thoroughly immoral from an intellectual viewpoint. He now turned to analyze his fantasies, carefully noting everything, and had to overcome considerable resistance in doing this, permitting fantasy in myself had the same effect as would be produced on a man if he came to his workshop and found all the tools flying about, doing things independently of his will. In studying his fantasies, Jung realized that he was studying the myth-creating function of the mind. Jung picked up the brown notebook in which he had set aside in 1902 and began writing in it. He noted his inner states and metaphors, such as being in the desert with an unbearably hot sun, that is, consciousness. In the 1925 seminar, he recalled that it occurred to him that he could write down all of his reflections in a sequence, and he was writing an autobiographical material, but not as an autobiography. From the time of the Platonic dialogues onward, the dialogical form has been a prominent genre in Western philosophy. In 387, St. Augustine wrote his soliloquies, which presented an extended dialogue between himself and reason, who instructs him. They commenced with the following lines. When I had been pondering many different things to myself for a long time, I had for many days been seeking my own self, and what my own good was, and what evil was to be avoided, and it suddenly spoke to me. What was it? I, myself, or someone else, inside or outside me? This is the very thing I would love to know, but don't. While Jung was writing in Black Book 2, I said to myself, what is this that I'm doing? It is certainly not science. What is it? When a voice said to me, that is art. This made the strangest sort of impression upon me, because it was not in any sense my impression that what I was writing was art. Then I came to this. Perhaps my unconscious is forming a personality that is not I, but which is insisting on coming through to expression. I don't know why exactly, but I knew to a certainty that the voice that had said my writing was art had come from a woman. Well, I said very emphatically to this voice that what I was doing was not art. And I felt a great resistance grow up within me. No voice came through, however, and I kept writing. This time, I caught her and said, no, it is not. And I felt as though an argument would ensue. As he thought that his voice was the soul in the primitive sense, which he called the anima. It's the Latin word for soul. He stated that putting down all the material for analysis, I was in effect writing letters to my anima, and in part of myself with a different viewpoint from my own. I got remarks of a new character. I was in analysis with a ghost and a woman. In retrospect, he recalled that this was the voice of a Dutch patient, which he had known from 1912 to 1918, who had persuaded a psychiatrist colleague that he was a misunderstood artist. That woman had thought that the unconscious was art, but Jung had maintained that it was nature. I have previously argued that the woman in question, the only Dutch woman in Jung's circle at the time, was Maria Moltzer, and that the psychiatrist in question was Jung's friend and colleague Franz Ricklin, who increasingly forsook analysis for painting. In 1913, he became a student of Augusto Giammatteo and the uncle of Alberto Giacometti. It's probably mispronounced both ways, and an important early abstract painter in his own right. I'm going to skip ahead here due to time constraints. The fucking show hasn't even started yet. I was skipping ahead. As a psychiatrist, I became worried, wondering if I was not on my way to, quote, doing a schizophrenia, unquote, as we said in the language of those days. I was just preparing a lecture on schizophrenia to be delivered at a congress in Aberdeen, and I kept saying to myself, will I be speaking of myself? Very likely I'll go mad after reading out this paper. The Congress was to take place in July 1914, exactly the same period when I saw myself in my 3 dreams voyaging on the southern sea. On July 31st, immediately after my lecture, I learned from the newspapers that war had broken out, finally, and I understood that when I disembarked in Holland on the next day, nobody was happier than I. Now I was sure that no schizophrenia was threatening me. I understood that my dreams and my visions came to me from the subsoil of the collective unconscious. What remained for me to do now was to deepen and validate this discovery, and this is what I have been trying to do for 40 years. At this moment, Jung considered that his fantasy had depicted not what would happen to him, but to Europe. In other words, that it was a precognition of a collective event. What he would later call a big dream. After this realization, he attempted to see whether and to what extent this was true of other fantasies that he experienced, and to understand the meaning of his correspondence between private fantasies and public events. This effort makes up so much of the subject matter of Liber Novus that he wrote that an outbreak of the war had enabled him to understand much of what he had previously experienced, and had given him the courage to write the earlier part of Liber Novus. Thus, he took the outbreak of the war as showing him that his fear of going mad was misplaced. It was no exaggeration to say that had war not been declared, Liber Novus would, in all likelihood, not have been compiled in 1955 and 1956. While discussing active imagination, Jung commented that the reason why the involvement looked very much like a psychosis is that the patient is integrating the same fantasy material to which the insane person falls victim, because he cannot integrate it, but is swallowed up by it. It is important to note that there are around 12 separate fantasies that Jung may have regarded as precognitive. In October of 1913, a repeated vision of flood and death of thousands, and the voice that said that this will become real. Autumn of, I don't know what the difference between autumn of 1913 and October of 1913 is, but whatever. In autumn of 1913, a vision of the sea of blood covering the northern lands. December of 1913, images of a dead hero and the slaying of Siegfried in a dream. December 25th, 1913, an image of the foot of a giant stepping on a city. Image of murder and bloody cruelty. January 1914, the image of a sea of blood and a procession of dead multitudes. January 1914, his soul comes up from the depths and asks if he will accept war and destruction. She shows him images of destruction, military weapons, human remains, sunken ships, destroyed states, etc. May 1914, a voice that says the sacrifice will fall left and right. And then June and July of 1914, thrice repeated dreams of being in a foreign land and having to return quickly by ship, and the descent of the icy cold.
The Abracast, occult, history, conspiracy, and violence.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Abercast. I'm John Towers. We're working on the Red Book of Carl Gustav Jung again this evening. The cold open was part of an analysis of the Red Book, analysis/history of the Red Book by someone named Sanu Sham. God damn it. I'm not even trying to be funny. Sanu Shamdasani. And I thought that would be a good kind of primer to lead up to this, because we're going to be doing the end of Liber Primus tonight, which is the first part of the Red Book. And this is the part that he was talking about in the historical or the history or analysis or whatever of the Red Book. He was talking specifically about the stuff that we've covered and we're about to cover in this evening in this series. So, I mean, let's get to it. Instruction. So this is back to the Red Book now. On the following night, I was led to a second image. I am standing on the rocky depths that seemed to me like a crater, and before me I see a house with columns, and I see Salome walking along the length of the wall towards the left, touching the wall like a blind person. And the serpent follows her, and the old man stands in the door and waves to me. Hesitantly, I draw closer, and he calls Salome back. She is like someone suffering, and I cannot detect any sacrilege in her nature. Her hands are white, and her face has a gentle expression, and the serpent lies before them. And I stand before them clumsily like a stupid boy overwhelmed by certain uncertainty and ambiguity. The old man's eyes searchingly... the old man eyes me searchingly and says, "What do you want here?" And I say, "Forgive me. It is not obtrusiveness or arrogance that leads me here. I am here perchance, not knowing what I want. A longing that stayed behind in your house yesterday and brought me here. You see, prophet, I am tired. My head is as heavy as lead, and I am lost in my ignorance, and I have toyed with myself enough. I played hypocritical games with myself, and they all would have disgusted me. Were it not clever to perform what others might expect from us in this world of men, it seems to me as if I were more real here, and yet I do not like being here." Wordlessly, Elijah and Salome step inside the house, and I follow them. Reluctantly, a feeling of guilt torments me. Is it a bad conscience? I would like to turn back, but I cannot. I stand before the play of fire and the shining crystal, and then I see the splendor of the Mother of God with the child. Peter stands in front of her in admiration. Then Peter alone with the key, the Pope with the triple crown, a Buddha sitting rigidly in a circle of fire, a many-armed bloody goddess. It is Salome who desperately wrings her hands. It takes hold of me, and she is my own soul, and now I see Elijah in the image of stone. Elijah and Salome stand smiling before me, and I say, "These visions are full of torment, and the meaning of these images is dark to me. Elijah, please shed some light." Elijah turns away silently and leads the way towards the left, and Salome enters the colonnade to the right. Elijah leads me into an even darker room. A burning red lamp hangs from the ceiling, and I sit down exhausted, and Elijah stands before me, leaning on a marble lion in the middle of the room, and Elijah says, "You are anxious. Your ignorance is to blame for your bad conscience, and not knowing is guilt, but you believe that it is the urge towards forbidden knowledge that causes your feeling of guilt. Why do you think that you are here?" And I say, I don't know, I sank into this place when unknowingly I tried resisting the not known. So here I am, astonished and confused, an ignorant fool. I experienced strange things in your house, things that frighten me and whose meaning is dark to me. And Elijah says, if it were not your law to be here, how would you be here? And I say, I am afflicted by fatal weakness, my father. And Elijah says, you are evasive, you cannot extricate yourself from your law. And I say, how can I extricate myself from what is unknown to me, which I cannot reach with either feeling or presentiment? And Elijah says, you are lying. Do you not know that you yourself recognize what it means if Salome loves you? I say, you are right. A doubtful and uncertain thought arose in me, but I have forgotten it again. And Elijah says, you have not forgotten it. It burned deep inside you. Are you cowardly? Or can you not differentiate this thought from your own self enough so that you wish to claim it for yourself? And I say, I thought the thought went too far for me, and I shun far-fetched ideas. They are dangerous, since I am a man, and you know how much men are accustomed to seeing thoughts as their very own, so that they eventually confuse them with themselves. And Elijah says, you will therefore confuse yourself with a tree or an animal, because you look at them, and because you exist with them in one and the same world. You must be your thoughts, because you are in a world of your own thoughts, but your own thoughts are just as much outside of yourself as a tree and these fucking animals. You are outside your body. I understand my thought world was for me more word than world, and I thought of my thought world. It is I. And Elijah says, do you say that your human world is every being outside of you? Or I? And I say, I stepped into your house, my father, with the fear of a schoolboy, but you have taught me salutary wisdom. I can also consider my thoughts as being outside of myself, and that helps me to return to the terrible conclusion that my tongue is reluctant to express. I thought that Salome loves me because I resembled John or you. This thought seemed unbelievable to me. That's why I rejected it, and I thought that she loves me because I am really quite opposite of you. She loves her badness in my badness. This thought was devastating. Elijah is silent. Heaviness lies on me, and then Salome steps in, comes over to me, and lays her arms around my shoulders, and she takes me for her father, in whose chair I sat, and I dare neither move nor speak. And Salome says, I know that you are not my father. You are his son, and I am your sister. And I say, you, Salome, my sister, was this the terrible attraction that emanated from you, the unnameable horror for you of your touch? Who was our mother? And Salome answers, Mary. It is a hellish dream, Mary, our mother. What madness lurks in your words, the mother of our Savior, our mother. When I crossed the threshold today, I foresaw calamity. Alas, it has come. You are out of your senses, Salome. Elijah, the protector of the divine law. Speak. Is this devilish spell cast by the rejected? How can she say such a thing? Or are both of you out of your senses? You are symbols of Mary is a symbol. I am simply too confused to see through you now. Elijah says, you may call us symbols for the same reason that you can also call your fellow men symbols, but if you wish to. But we are just as real as your fellow men. You invade nothing and solve nothing by calling us symbols. You plunge me into terrible confusion, I say. Do you wish to be real? And Elijah says, we are certainly what you call real. Here we are, and you have to accept us. The choice is yours. I am silent. Salome has removed herself. Uncertainly, I look around. Behind me, a high golden red flame burns around an altar. The serpent has encircled the flame. Its eyes glitter with golden reflections. Swaying, I turn to the exit. I step out into the hall and see a powerful lion going before me. Outside, it is a wide, cold, starry night. It is no small matter to acknowledge one's yearning, for this many need to make particular effort at honesty. All too many do not want to know where their yearning is, because it would seem to them impossible or too distressing, and yet yearning is the way of life. If you do not acknowledge your yearnings, then you do not follow yourself, but go on foreign ways and others have indicated to you. So you do not live in your life, but in an alien one. Sorry, I like that. But who should live your life if you do not live it? It is not only stupid to exchange your own life for an alien one, but also hypocritical game. Because you can never really live the life of others. You can only pretend to do it, deceiving the other and yourself, since you can only live your own life. If you give up yourself, you live it in others. Thereby, you become selfish to others. And thus you deceive others. Everyone thus believes that such life is possible. It is, however, only apish imitation. Though giving in to your apish appetite, you infect others, because the ape stimulates the apish. So you turn yourself and others into apes through reciprocal imitation, and you live according to the average expectations. The image of the hero was set up for all in every age through the appetite for imitation. Therefore, the hero was murdered, since we have all been aping him. Do you know why you cannot abandon apishness? For fear of loneliness and defeat. I like that too. To live oneself means to be one's own task. Never say that it is a pleasure to live oneself. It will be no joy but a long suffering, since you must become your own creator. If you want to create yourself, then you do not begin with the best and the highest, but with the worst and the deepest. Man, he just keeps them coming right here, doesn't he? The flowing together of the stream of life is not joy, but pain, since it is power against power, guilt, and shatters the sanctified. The image of the Mother of God with the child that I foresee indicates to me the mystery of the transformation. If forethinking and pleasure unite in me, a third arises from them, the divine Son, who is the supreme meaning, the symbol of the passing over into a new creation. I do not myself become this supreme meaning, or the symbol, but the symbol becomes in me such that it has the substance, and I mine. Thus I stand like Peter and worship before the miracle of the transformation and the becoming of the real God in me. Although I am not the Son of God myself, I represent him nevertheless as one who was a mother to the God, and one, therefore, to whom the name of God, the freedom of the binding and losing has been given. The binding and the losing takes place in me. But insofar as it takes place in me, I am not part of the world. I am part of the world, Jesus. But insofar as it takes place in me, I am part of the world. It also takes place through me in the world, and no one can hinder it. It doesn't take place according to the way of my will, but the way of unavoidable effect. I am not a master over you, but the beginning of the God in me. I lack the past with one key. I lock the past with one key. With the other, I open the future. This takes place through the transformation. The miracle of transformation commands. I am its servant, just as the Pope is. The two keys? Come on, that's brilliant. You see how incredible it was to believe such of oneself. It applies not to me, but to the symbol. The symbol becomes my Lord and unfailing commander. It will fortify its reign and change itself into a starry and riddling image, whose meaning turns completely inward, and whose pleasure radiates outward like a blazing fire. A Buddha in the flames, because I sink into my symbol to such an extent the symbol changes me from my one into my other. And that cruel goddess of my interior, my womanly pleasure, my own other, the tormented tormentor. That which is to be tormented. I have interpreted these images best as I can with poor words. In the moment of your bewilderment, follow your forethinking and not your blind desire, since forethinking leads you to the difficulties that should always come first. They come, nevertheless, if you look for light, and you fall first into an even deeper darkness. In this darkness, you find a light with weak reddish flame and gives you only a low brightness. But it is not enough for you to see your neighbor. It is exhausting to reach this goal that seems to be no goal. And so it is good. I am paralyzed and therefore ready to accept my forethinking rest on the lion, my power. I held to the sanctified form, and I didn't want to allow the chaos to break through its dams, and I believed in the order of the world and hated everything disorganized and unformed. Therefore, above all, I had to realize that my own law had brought me to this place as God developed in me. I thought he was part of myself, and I thought that my I included him, and therefore I took him for my thoughts, but I also considered that my thoughts were part of my I. Thus, I entered into my thoughts and into the thinking about God. In that, I took him for part of myself. On account for my thoughts, I left myself. Therefore, myself became hungry and made God into a selfish thought. If I leave myself, my hunger will drive me to find myself in my objects. That is my thought. Therefore, you love reasonable and orderly thoughts, since you could not endure it if yourself was disordered. That is, unsuitable thoughts. Therefore, your selfish wish you pushed out of your thoughts everything that you do not consider ordered. That is unfitting. You create order according to what you know. You do not know the thoughts of chaos, and yet they exist. My thoughts are not my self, and my I does not embrace the thought. Your thoughts have this meaning and that, not just one, but many meanings. No one knows how many. My thoughts are not myself, but exactly like the things of the world, alive and dead, just as I am not damaged through the living in a partly chaotic world, so too I am not damaged If I live in my partly chaotic thought world, thoughts are natural events that you do not possess, and whose meaning you only imperfectly recognize through thoughts grow in me like a forest populated by different animals, but man is domineering in his thinking, and therefore he kills the pleasure of the forest and that of the wild animals. Man is violent in his desire, and he becomes himself a forest and a forest animal. Just as I have freedom in the world, I also have freedom in my thoughts, and freedom is conditional. To certain things of the world, I must say, you should not be in thus. You should be different. Yet first, I look carefully at their nature, otherwise I cannot change it. I proceed in the same way with certain thoughts. You change those things of the world that, not being useful in themselves, endanger your welfare. Proceed likewise with the thoughts. Nothing is complete, and much is in dispute. The way of life is transformation, not exclusion. Well-being is a better judge than the law. But as I become aware of the freedom in my thought world, Salome embraced me, and thus I became a prophet. Since I had found a pleasure in the primordial being in the forest and in the wild animals, it stands too close to reason for me to set myself on par with my visions, and for me take pleasure in seeing. I am in danger of believing that I, myself, am significant, since I see the significant. This will always drive us crazy. We transform the vision into foolishness and monkey business, since we cannot desist from imitation. Just as my thinking is the son of forethinking, so is my pleasure the daughter of love, of the innocent and the conceiving mother of God. Aside from my Christ, Mary gave birth to Salome. Therefore, Christ in the Gospel of the Egyptians says to Salome, eat every herb, but do not eat the bitter. And when Salome wanted to know, Christ spoke of her. If you crush the covering of shame, and when the two become one, and the male with the female, neither male nor female, forethinking is procreative. Love is respective. Both are beyond this world. Here are understanding and pleasure. We only suspect the other. It would be madness to claim that they are in this world, so much that is riddling and cunning coils around the light. I won the power back again from the depths, and it went before me like a lion.
Learn more at abracast.com. Get bonus content by signing up for the mailing list. Get all that, plus many exclusive episodes by supporting the show at subscribestar.com.
Just want to take a second to ask you guys to check out abracast.com. Remind you that it's still there. Abracast.com. It's the home base for all this stuff. Check out the storefront. We got some great t-shirts, tarot card, the Abracast tarot card deck. It's not officially called that. It's just my tarot card deck, but it's got a ton of Abracast stuff in it. And also check out Mysteries in the Dark while you're there. Check out the Mysteries in the Dark. If you're interested in role-playing games or whatnot, it's free. It's just something fun that I put together. It's dropping very, very soon. Okay, so let's do this. Let's get this thing done. The last section we're covering this evening is called Resolution. Yeah, Mysteries in the Dark, the New Apocrypha, The Pale Horse. Check it out. Just check it out. The Resolution. On the third night, deep longing to continue experiencing the mysteries seized me. The struggling between doubt and desire was great in me, but suddenly I saw that I stood before a steep, rigid wasteland. It is a dazzling, bright day. I catch a sight of the prophet high above me. His hands makes a verting movement, and I abandon my decision to climb up. I wait below, gazing upwards. I look to the right. It is a dark night, and to the left it is a bright day. The rock separates day into night. On the dark side lies a big black serpent, and on the bright side a white serpent. They thrust their heads towards each other, eager for battle, and Elijah stands on the heights above them. Serpents pounce on one another, and a terrible wrestling ensues. The black serpent seems to be stronger, and the white serpent draws back. Great billows of dust rise from the place of struggling, but then I see the black serpent pulls itself back again. The front part of its body has become white, and both serpents curl about themselves, one in light and the other in darkness. And Elijah asks, "What did you see?" And I answer, I saw the fight of two formidable serpents. It seemed to me as if the black would overcome the white serpent, but behold, the black one withdrew, and its head at the top of the part of its body had turned white. "Do you understand that?" Elijah asked. "I have thought it over, but I cannot understand it. Should it mean the power of the good light will become so great that even the darkness that resists it will be illuminated by it?" Elijah climbs before me into the heights to a very high summit, and I follow. When I peak, on the peak, we come to some masonry made of huge blocks. There's a round embankment on the summit. Inside lies a large courtyard, and there is a mighty boulder in the middle like an altar. And the prophet stands on the stone and says, "This is the temple of the sun. This place is a vessel that collects the light of the sun." And Elijah climbs down from the stone. His form becomes smaller in descending and finally becomes dwarf-like, unlike himself. I ask, "Who are you?" "I am a mime, and I will show you the well springs." The collected light becomes water and flows in many springs from the summit into the valleys of the earth. And then he drives down into a crevice. Then he dives down into a crevice. I follow him down into the dark cave, and I hear the rippling of a spring, and I hear the voice of the dwarf from below. "Here are my wells. Whoever drinks from them becomes wise." But I cannot reach down, and I lose courage. I leave the cave, and doubting, pace back and forth in the square of the yard, and everything appears to me strange and incomprehensible. It is solitary and deathly silent here, and the air is clear and cool as the remotest heights, and a wonderful flood of sunlight all around. The great wall surrounds me. A serpent crawls over the stone. It is the serpent of the prophet. How did it come out of the underworld into the world above? I followed it to see how it crawls into the wall. I feel weird all over. A little house stands over there with a portico, minuscule, snuggling against the rock. The serpents become infinitely small, and I feel as if I too am shrinking, and the walls enlarge into a huge mountain, and I see that I am below on the foundations of the crater in the underworld, and I stand before the house of the prophet, and he steps out of the door of his house, and I say, "I notice, Elijah, that you have shown me and let me experience all sorts of strange things and allowed me to come before you today, but I confess that it is all dark to me. Your world appears to me today in a new light. Just now it was Just now it was as if I were separated by a starry distance from your place, which I still wanted to reach today, but behold, it seems to be one and the same place. And Elijah says, you wanted to come here far too much. I did not deceive you. You deceived yourself. He sees badly who wants to see. You have overreached yourself. It is true, I said. I eagerly longed to reach you, to hear more. Salome startled me and led me into bewilderment, and I felt dizzy because what she said seemed to me to be monstrous and like madness. By the way, where is Salome? How impetuous you are, Elijah says. What's up with you? Step over to the crystal and prepare yourself in its light. A wreath of fire shines around the stone. I am seized with fear at what I see. The coarse peasant's boot, the foot of a giant that crushes an entire city. I see the cross, the removal of the cross, the mourning, how agonizing this sight is. No longer do I yearn. I see the divine child with the white serpent in his right hand and the black serpent in his left hand. I see the green mountain, the cross of Christ on it, and a stream of blood flowing from the summit of the mountain. I can look no longer. It is unbearable. I see the cross and Christ on it. This last hour of torment to the foot of the cross. The black serpent coils itself. It has wound itself around my feet. I am held fast, and I spread my arms wide, and Salome draws me near. The serpent has wound itself around my whole body, and my countenance is that of a lion. Salome says, Mary was the mother of Christ. Do you understand? And I answer, I see the terrible and incomprehensible power forces me to imitate the Lord in his final torment. But how can I presume to call Mary my mother? And Salome says, you are Christ. I stand with outstretched arms like someone crucified, my body taut and horribly entwined by the serpents. You, Salome, say that I am Christ? It is as if I stood alone on a high mountain with stiff, outstretched arms. The serpent squeezes my body in its terrible coils, and the blood streams from my body, spilling down the mountainside. Salome bends down to my feet and wraps her black hair around them, and she lies thus for a long time. And then she cries, I see the light! Truly, she sees. Her eyes are open. The serpent falls from my body and lies languidly on the ground. And I stride over it and kneel at the feet of the prophet, whose form shines like a flame. And Elijah says, your work is fulfilled here. Other things will come. Seek untiringly. And above all, write exactly what you see. Salome looks in a rapture at the light that streams from the prophet, and Elijah transforms into a huge flame of a white light. The serpent wraps itself around her foot as if paralyzed. Salome kneels before the light, a wonder-struck devotion. Tears fall from my eyes, and I hurry out into the night. Like one who has no part in the glory of mystery, my feet do not touch the ground of this earth, and it is as if I were melting into the air. My longing led me up to the overbright day, whose light is opposed to the dark space of forethinking. The opposite principle is, as I think I understand it, heavenly love, the mother, the darkness that surrounds forethinking, appears to be due to the fact that it is invisible in the interior and takes place in the depths, but the brightness of love seems to come from the fact that love is visible, life and action. My pleasure was the forethinking, and had its merry garden there, surrounded by the darkness and the night. I climbed down to my pleasure, but ascended to my love, and I see Elijah high above me. This indicates that forethinking stands nearer to love than I, a man, do. And before I ascend to love, a condition must be fulfilled, which represents itself in the fight between the two serpents. Left is day and right is night. The realm of love is light, and the realm of forethinking is dark. Both principles have separated themselves strictly, and they're even hostile to one another, and have taken the form of serpents. This form indicates the demoniac nature of both principles, and I recognize in this struggle a repetition of that vision where I saw the struggle between the sun and the black serpent. At the time the loving light was annihilated and blood began to pour out, this was the great war. But the spirit of the depths wants this struggle to be understood as a conflict in every man's own nature. Since after the death of the hero, our urge to live could no longer imitate anything, it therefore went to the depths of every man and excited the terrible conflict between these powers of the depths. Forethinking is singleness, love is togetherness. Both need one another, and yet they kill one another, since men do not know what the conflict occurs inside themselves. They go mad, and one lays the blame on the other. If one half of mankind is at fault, then every man is half at fault. Does not see the conflict in his own soul, which is, however, the source of all outer disaster. If you are aggravated against your brother, think that you are aggravated against the brother in you. That is, against what in you is similar to your brother. As a man, you are part of mankind, and therefore you have a share in the whole of mankind, as you were the whole of mankind. If you overpower and kill your fellow man who is contrary to you, then you also kill that person in yourself, and have murdered a part of your life, and the spirit of the dead man follows you and does not let your life become joyful. You need your wholeness to live onward. If I myself endure the pure principle and I step on one side and become one-sided, therefore my forethinking in this principle of the Heavenly Mother becomes an ugly dwarf who lives in a dark cave like an unborn in the womb. You do not follow him, even if he says to you that you could drink wisdom from his source, but forethinking appears to you that there as dwarfish cleverness, false and of the night. Just as the Heavenly Mother appears to me down there as Salome, and which is lacking in the pure principle appears as the serpent. The hero strives after the utmost in the pure principle, therefore he finally falls for the serpent. If you go to thinking, take your heart with you. If you go to love, take your head with you. Love is empty without thinking, thinking hollow without love. The serpent lurks behind the pure principle. Therefore, I lost courage until I found the serpent that once led me across the other principle and climbing down and becoming smaller. Great is he who is in love, since love is the present act of the great Creator. My present moment of the becoming was lapsing of the world. Mighty is he who loves, but whoever distances himself from love feels himself powerful. In your forethinking, you recognize the nullity of your current being as the smallest point between the infinity of what has passed and what is to come. The thinker is small. He feels great if he distances himself from thinking. But if we speak About appearances, it is the other way around. To whoever is in love, form is trifling. But his field of vision ends with the form given to him. To whoever is in thinking form, it is unsurpassable in the height of heaven. But at night he sees the diversity of the innumerable worlds and their never-ending cycles. Whoever is in love is a full and overflowing vessel that awaits the giving. And whoever is in the forethinking is deep and hollow and awaits fulfillment. Love and forethinking are in one and the same place. Love cannot be without forethinking, and forethinking cannot be without love. Man is always too much in one or the other. This comes with human nature. Animals and plants seem to have enough in every way, and only man staggers between too much and too little, and he wavers, and he is uncertain in how much he must give here and how much there. His knowledge and ability is insufficient, and yet he must still do it himself. Man doesn't only grow from within himself, for he is also creative from within himself. The God becomes revealed in him. Human nature is little skilled in divinity, and therefore man fluctuates between too much and too little. The spirit of this time has condemned us to haste. You have no more futurity, no more past if you serve the spirit of this time. We need the life of eternity. We bear the future of the past in its depths, and the future is old and the past is young. You serve the spirit of this time. And because I believe that you are able to escape the spirit of the depths, but this depths do not hesitate any longer and will force you into the mysteries of Christ. It belongs to the mastery that man can It belongs to this mystery that man is not redeemed through the hero, but becomes a Christ himself. The antecedent example of the saints symbolically teach this to us. Whoever wants to see will see badly. It was my will that deceived me. It was my will that provoked the huge uproar among the demons. Should I therefore not want anything I have? And I fulfilled my will as well as I could, and thus I fed everything in me that strived. In the end, I found that I wanted myself in everything, but without looking for myself. Therefore, I no longer wanted to seek myself outside of myself, but within. Then I wanted to grasp myself, and then I wanted to go on again without knowing what I wanted, and thus I fell into the mystery. Should I therefore not want anything anymore? You wanted this war, that is good. If you had not, then the evil of this war would be small. But with your wanting, you make the evil great. If you do not succeed in producing the greatest evil out of this war, you will never learn the violent deed and learn to overcome fighting what lies outside you. Therefore, it is good if you want the greatest evil with your own heart. You are Christians and run after heroes and wait for redeemers who should take the agony on themselves for you, totally spare you Golgotha. With that, you pile up a mountain of cavalry all over Europe. If you succeed in making terrible evil out of this war and throw innumerable victims into the abyss, this is good, since it makes each of you ready to sacrifice himself. For as you draw close to the accomplishment of Christ's mysteries. You already feel the fists of iron, one on your back. This is the beginning of the way. If blood, fire, and the cry of distress fill this world, then you will recognize yourself in your acts. Drink your fill of the bloody atrocities of the war. Feast upon the killing and the destruction, and then your eyes will open, and you will see that you yourselves are the bearers of such fruit. You are on the way, if you will. All this willing creates blindness. This blindness leads to the way. Should we will error? You should not, but you should do will that error, which you take for the best truth, as men have always done. The symbol of the crystal signifies the unalterable law of events that comes of itself. In the seed you grasp what is to come. I saw something terrible and incomprehensible. He's talking about the Christmas Day of 1913. I saw the peasant's boot, the sign of the horrors of the peasants' war, of the murdering incendiaries, and of the bloody cruelty, and I knew to interpret the sign for myself as nothing but the fact that something bloody and dreadful lay before us, and I saw the foot of a giant that crushed a whole city, and how could I interpret the sign otherwise? I saw the way of self-sacrifice began here. They will all become terribly enraptured by the tremendous experience. In their blindness, will want to understand them as outer events. It is an inner happening that is the way to perfection of the mystery of Christ. So that peoples learn self-sacrifice. May the frightfulness become so great that it can turn men's eye inwards, so that their will no longer sees the self in others, but in themselves. I saw it, and I know that this is the way. I saw the death of Christ, and I saw his lament. I felt the agony of his dying, of the great dying. I saw a new God, a child who subdued daemons in his hand. The God holds the separate principle in his power and unites them. A God develops through the union of the principles in me and their union. If you will one of these principles, so you are in one, but far from your being another. If you will both principles and one and the other, and you excite the conflict between the principles, since you cannot want both at the same time, from this arises the need, and God appears in it. He takes your conflicting will in his hands, the hand of a child whose will is simple and beyond conflict. You cannot learn this. It can only develop in you. You cannot will this. It takes the will from your hand and wills itself. Will yourself. That leads to the way. But fundamentally, you are terrified of yourself, and therefore you prefer to run to the others rather than to yourself. I saw the mountain of the sacrifice, and the blood poured in streams from its side. When I saw how pride and the powerful satisfied men, and how beauty beamed from the eyes of women when the great war broke out, I knew that mankind was on the way to self-sacrifice. The spirit of the depths have seized mankind and forces self-sacrifice upon it. Do not seek the guilty here or there. The spirit of the depths clutched the fate of men into itself, as it clutched mine, and leads mankind through the river of blood to the mystery, and the mystery man himself becomes the two principles, the lion and the serpent. Because I also want my being other, I must become a Christ. I am made into Christ, and I must suffer it. Thus the redeeming blood flows. Through the self-sacrifice, my pleasure is changed and goes above into its higher principle. Love is sighted, but pleasure is blind. Both principles are one in the symbol of flame, and the principles strip themselves of human form. The mystery showed me an image is what I should afterwards live. I do not possess any of those boons that the mystery showed me, for I still had to earn all of them.
Thank you for listening to this episode. Send an email or visit us on social media to let us know what you think about this topic. And please remember to leave a 5-star rate and review.
If you're considering supporting the show on Subscribestar, let me tell you a little bit about what's going on over there. The Degree of the Red Archive, which is the $1 a month. You get access to some bonus audio, but there's also 50 plus hours of archived episodes. These are older episodes. They're not on the stream anymore. It's the only place to find them is in the Red Archive. There's a $3 a month tier called the Fellowcraft Degree, and that has 30 and 40 hours of exclusive Fellowcraft episodes. You get access to all of those. And those have never been on the stream. Those have never been on the normal show. They're exclusive only to the Fellowcraft Degree. $5. The $5 tier is the Degree of the Red Mark. And so for $5, you get the archived episodes, you get the Fellowcraft episodes, and then you are able to get some swag, bookmarks, temporary tattoos, exclusive tarot cards, all different kinds of stuff coming out every once in a while. And then for $10 a month, you become a knight in the Degree of the Vessel of the Art. So the Vessel of the Art degree, you get the archived episodes, the exclusive episodes, the swag, and then you get like the keystone of all swag. You get your very own Vessel of the Art, which is a full-size, fully glass mason jar with the Advertise sigil logo on it. So if you're considering helping out and supporting the show, that's where you do it, and that's what you get. If you look around on Abercast.com, you can also find a PayPal donate button. So if you don't want a monthly thing, another monthly thing to take care of, but you're like, hey, Towers is a good guy. I want to buy him a drink. You shoot me, not a coffee. I don't drink that shit, But you could PayPal me some money. All of your help is appreciated. And, yeah, that's it. I'm John. This is it. Like I said, I'm okay. Look here.